Friend, the story I'm about to tell you isn't a work of imagination. It's a real incident that happened to one of my close friends in an old town in India. When he told me about it, there was still that same terror in his eyes, the kind of fear that never leaves a person's face for the rest of their life. I still can't forget his face. His hands were trembling, his voice was shaking, and he said, "Brother, if I survived that night, maybe it's because something changed on the way, or maybe that ghost looked at me and felt satisfied." Hearing that sent chills down my spine. And then he began his story. It was a November night. The wind was cold, but it carried a strange silence with it, heavy and unsettling. My friend lived in an old apartment on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by narrow alleys where barely anyone passed at night. That day, his parents had gone to visit his sister. He was completely alone in the house. He said everything was perfectly normal: dinner, some TV, and then a short break on the balcony. But after 11 p.m., something about the atmosphere of the house began to change. The TV screen started flickering slightly. At first, he thought it was just a voltage issue, but then he felt a faint vibration, like the ground had quietly taken a breath. He turned off the TV with the remote and decided to step out on the balcony for some air. The balcony was right next to his bedroom. As soon as he opened the door, a cold breeze brushed against his face. But it wasn't just cold, it was heavy, clinging, almost sorrowful, like the air itself carried grief. He stood at the edge of the balcony, looking down at the ground. In the parking area below the opposite building, something caught his eye: a white sheet lying on the ground. At first, he thought someone had thrown it out, but then the sheet began to move. And from beneath that movement, slowly, as if rising from fog, a woman emerged. She was draped entirely in white, tall and slender, with long black hair that looked damp and tangled. Her face was so pale it didn't even seem human. And her eyes, those eyes, burned in the dark like two faint embers. My friend went silent when he told me this part. Then he said, "She lifted her face and looked straight at me." In that moment, his breath froze. She was smiling, a cold, sinister smile with no trace of human emotion. Her lips curved unnaturally, and behind that curve there was something else, a hunger, old and unending. As she kept staring, her gaze fixed directly on the balcony. My friend said every ounce of courage in him shattered. His heart raced, his hands went numb, and he felt rooted to the floor. He crouched down and quietly slipped back inside. He shut the door and locked it immediately. But honestly, that night, the fear that hid in the darkness had only just begun. As soon as he came inside, the TV screen went completely black. The power had gone out. The entire house was swallowed by darkness. It would have been logical to think it was a power cut, but there was something alive in that darkness, a presence that could be felt. He grabbed his flashlight and checked every corner, hall, dining area, bathroom. Everything seemed normal. But something was off. The air felt heavier, slower, as if soaked with sorrow. He walked toward the kitchen. With every step, he felt as though someone was walking right behind him, silent, watching. As he reached the kitchen door, a cold breath brushed against the back of his neck, faint but clear, like someone had exhaled softly beside his ear. He swung the flashlight around the room. A steel bowl was lying on the floor, and it was moving. It would tremble, stop, and then tremble again, as if an unseen hand was gently tapping it. At that moment, my friend turned around. No one was there, just darkness and silence. But his heart kept insisting someone was there, someone invisible but definitely there. He went back to his bedroom and hid under the blanket, but sleep was nowhere near. Every sound seemed louder, the ticking of the wall clock, the faint creaks of the house, everything echoed in his mind. Then he saw it, a shadow on the wall, a long, thin shadow that stretched unnaturally. At first, he thought it was a trick of light, but then the shadow began to move. It walked across the room, even though no one was there. It crawled up the wall down to the floor again, moving slowly, deliberately, unnervingly. His throat went dry. He shut his eyes and whispered a prayer. For a few seconds, everything went silent until he heard it, a faint dragging sound like footsteps being pulled across the floor, slow and heavy. He froze, raised the flashlight again, and looked toward the balcony. The glass door was closed, but in the reflection, something was moving outside. His face went pale. The woman in white was there again. But this time, her body looked different, as if light was shining from within her. My friend said his soul felt like it left his body at that moment. Every bit of courage drained away. He slammed the door shut and crawled under his bed, his mind racing, his breath trembling. Then he told me something that made even my breath stop. I couldn't sleep that night, but the worst part wasn't that she was outside. It was the feeling that she was already inside. But what happened after that was the most terrifying night of his life. That night, the darkness was so deep that even his flashlight's beam felt weak. His heart was still pounding fast, his hands drenched in sweat. He tried convincing himself that maybe all this was his imagination, but that chilling air, that presence watching him, didn't feel like a lie. He slowly looked toward the door from beside his bed. The entire house was silent, but within that silence he suddenly heard a faint sound. Thap, 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 like someone walking barefoot on the floor. The sound was coming from the kitchen. With each step it came closer and closer. Then it stopped. My friend stood completely still, holding his breath. Suddenly, a plate crashed to the floor with a loud clang. Clang! That sound hit him like a shockwave. His heart jumped to his throat. He picked up the flashlight and opened the door. A blast of cold air struck his face. The kitchen was pitch dark. He shone the light around. Everything was in its place except for a single plate lying on the floor. But then he saw something move in the corner. He turned the beam toward it but couldn't see clearly, just a faint whiteness, like part of a white dress. He took a step back. Then the flashlight flickered once, twice, and went out. Now there was only darkness. A faint breath escaped right next to his ear, impossibly close. His body froze. He gathered all his courage and turned around. And saw it. A white figure stood right in front of him. Its face was deathly pale, eyes completely black, and that same smile, that demonic smile he had seen on the balcony. There was no sound, only the pounding of his heart. Thump, thump, thump. The figure glided toward him, not walking but floating. I wanted to scream, he told me, but my throat was locked. No sound would come out. The woman stopped just a hand's distance away. She tilted her head slightly, looked at him, and whispered in a soft but audible voice, "Were you watching me?" My friend stumbled backward. His foot hit something and he fell to the floor. The flashlight rolled away, and its weak beam landed just enough to reveal the woman's feet for a moment. And friends, her feet were upside down. He wanted to scream, but no sound came. Suddenly, the woman stopped moving, leaning over him, her face inches from his. Her eyes seemed to look straight into his soul. Then she opened her lips and blew a cold breath onto his face. "My brother," he said to me. In that moment, I thought my breath would stop. That breath carried a sound with it, a faint, deep laugh. It echoed in his ears, dark and hollow. He shut his eyes tight and reached out blindly for the flashlight. But when he opened them, she was gone. Everything was silent again. But the air was still the same, heavy, freezing, and now with a faint stench. He steadied his legs and ran back to the bedroom. He shut the door, latched it, and sat down beside the bed. His hands were still shaking. But then he felt someone standing outside the door. He listened carefully. Then came the same sound, thap, thap. The barefoot footsteps. And now they were right outside his bedroom. A pale shadow slid beneath the door, slow and white. He was so terrified he shut his eyes tight. A few seconds later, someone knocked hard on the door. Thud. Once, then twice, then 3 times, and silence again. He began to pray, whispering, "Oh God, please save me." Then suddenly, long, thin, pale fingers slipped under the door. White, bony, and ice cold. My friend screamed and hid behind the bed. He saw those hands withdraw. Then slowly, the door began to creak open. From the darkness beyond, a figure appeared, the same woman in white. Her head tilted down, her hair falling forward. She raised her face and looked straight behind the bed where my friend was hiding. And then that cold, eerie laughter filled the room, growing slowly louder. Now I'm inside. For a split second, the lights flickered and then went out again. The room was swallowed in darkness. Only his heartbeat and that laughter remained, blending into a terrifying rhythm. My friend said he was on the edge of fainting. "I don't remember what happened after that," he told me. "All I know is that when my parents came in the morning, I was lying on the floor, and the bedroom door was wide open. And the most horrifying part, on the glass panel above the door, there were tiny fingerprints pressed from the inside." Friends, after that day, my friend was never the same again. He still says that sometimes at night, he sees a faint white shadow pass outside his house. And sometimes the air in his room moves, even when every window is closed. That woman, she's still out there somewhere. Whether she's bound to him or searching for her next victim, no one knows. What happened after that, his mind could never forget. But this wasn't just a bad dream. It was a real secret, a revenge born from an old death. Days passed, but after that, the atmosphere in his house was never normal again. Every night, something strange happened. Sometimes the window opened by itself. Sometimes a noise came from the kitchen as if something had fallen. And sometimes a cold whisper blew near his ear saying, "I will come back." At first, he thought he was losing his mind. But when the lights in his house kept flickering and shadows moved across the walls, he became certain that woman was still there. He often had the same dream at night. A woman dressed in white, standing in front of an old building, holding something in her hands, screaming, "I want justice." That dream was driving him insane. One day, he decided to find out the truth behind the woman's secret. Why did she appear only around his house? Why did her shadow come alive only at night? He left early in the morning and went straight to the building's caretaker, an old man who had been living there for 25 years. He asked, "Did any accident ever happen here?" The old man's face turned pale. He only said, "Son, don't ask that question again. It's been 13 years since that incident." My friend was stubborn. He said, "I want to know everything, the truth." The old man remained silent for a few seconds, then spoke softly. "There used to be a girl living here, maybe 25 or 26 years old. Her name was Meera. She was cheerful and kind. But one night she fell from the terrace of this building." My friend asked, "Did she jump by herself?" The old man shook his head. "Everyone says yes, but I know that night she didn't jump on her own." Then he whispered, "Her husband killed her." Hearing that, my friend felt the ground slip from under his feet. "He killed her, but why?" The old man said her husband was having an affair with someone else. Meera was in his way. He pushed her off the terrace. The police called it a suicide. But ever since that night, every year on that same day and night, someone sees the woman in white near the terrace. White dress. Yes, it was her wedding dress. She was wearing it that night too. My friend's heart stopped for a moment. It was the same dress he had seen from his balcony. The same white gown, the same face, the same smile. He returned home, his mind full of questions. That night he tried convincing himself that it was all a lie, but as soon as the clock struck 12, he again heard the same thap, thap sound on his bedroom door. He closed his eyes, but the sound grew louder, thap, thap, thap. Gathering courage, he picked up the flashlight and went to the door. Underneath the door, he saw a faint white shadow. This time, he didn't stay silent. He shouted loudly, "Who are you? What do you want?" Then everything went quiet. Suddenly, a soft voice came, as if from far away. "I want justice." After that, something appeared written in red above the door. Terrace. His heart turned cold. He decided he would go to the terrace to see what was up there. It was 2 a.m. All the lights in the building were off. The air was cold and filled with silence. He took the flashlight and slowly began climbing the stairs to the terrace. With every step, it felt like someone was walking behind him. Sometimes a shadow moved across the wall. Sometimes he could feel a breath passing by his ear. When he reached the terrace, a sudden gust of wind hit him, so strong that his flashlight slipped from his hand. He saw in the corner a white figure was standing. At first, he thought it was his imagination, but then the figure slowly turned toward him. And he saw the same face, the same woman in a white dress with red glowing eyes. He said, "I don't want to hurt you, just tell me, what do you want?" The woman raised her finger toward the edge of the terrace. There was an old bloodstain, dry but still visible. Then she said, "Here, this is where I died." Her voice was filled with both pain and horror. I was pushed, and everyone said I jumped. There were tears on her face, but her lips were smiling. She said, "I only want one thing, that his soul never finds peace until I get justice." Then she lifted her face upward, and suddenly the wind grew stronger, her white dress swirling wildly in the air. At that moment, my friend screamed, "What do you want from me?" And she said, "You have seen me, now you will be part of my story too." Saying this, the woman vanished into the wind. Only a faint white mist remained, and a chilling breeze, as if someone had just passed by him. The next morning when he woke up, the terrace door was open, and there was a mark on his hand. A small fingerprint, as if someone had held his hand during the night. Since that day, he goes to the terrace every day. He says he feels she's still there, waiting. For her justice, for peace for her soul. After that night, everything changed. The morning light now felt darker and the air carried a strange heaviness. The TV would turn on by itself, showing white static, and sometimes within that static, a faint face appeared, the same woman in a white dress, sometimes smiling, sometimes staring silently. My friend first thought it was stress, but when he saw a single white hair floating in his glass with a faint red lipstick mark on it, everything changed. A soft whisper echoed near his ear, "You promised freedom." His whole body trembled. In the mirror, his reflection often moved a second late, and sometimes another face appeared behind him. One day, when he looked into the mirror, his reflection was gone. Instead, the woman in white was standing there, moving closer, and as he watched in horror, she stepped out of the mirror and into him. He screamed and shattered the mirror, but instead of blood, a cold mist spilled out. From within the mist, a voice whispered, "Now you're part of me." To uncover the truth, we spoke to the building's caretaker. He told us that years ago, a woman named Meera lived there. She had fallen from the terrace one night and died. Everyone said it was suicide, but people whispered that her husband had pushed her. My friend began his own investigation. He dug up old receipts, bank statements, and CCTV footage. Every piece of evidence pointed toward the husband. When the police reopened the case, they found traces of blood on the terrace that matched Meera's DNA. The husband was arrested and the case went to court. Meera's family finally found some peace, but inside my friend, something else had changed. That night when he came home, the camera footage glitched, but one frame clearly showed the words, "Now I'm here." After that, strange things started happening in his house. The clock would stop on its own, windows would shut without wind, and sometimes faint marks appeared on his hands at night, as if someone had gripped them tightly. In his dreams, the terrace returned and Meera's voice echoed, "You gave me justice, but not peace." One night he went back to the terrace and said, "Meera, I got you justice. Now please let me go." For a moment everything went silent. Then a faint voice drifted through the air, "Maybe." There was calm on his face then, but a strange coldness in his eyes. The court sentenced the husband. Everyone said justice had been served, but my friend knew the truth. The law may have given justice, but the spirit was still with him. On lonely nights, he would see a pale face in the mirror, smiling faintly, whispering, "We're together now." He left the city and tried to start over under a new name, but his shadow followed him. Sometimes when I called him, his voice still carried that same coldness. People say that if you ever go near that old building's terrace, you might still see a white silhouette smiling faintly, and the air suddenly turns cold. Maybe it's Meera, or maybe a part of her now lives within everyone who hears this story. So if you ever stand alone on your balcony at night and feel a white figure watching you, don't turn around. The story might have just found you. If you felt a chill while watching, maybe she's still watching you too. Don't forget to subscribe to WraithEcho before the lights go out.